Our next speaker is Dr. de Silva. He is an expert on refugees and children, having directly experienced war in the jungles of his country, Sri Lanka. He is the founder of the Institute for Strategic Studies and Democracy. Dr. de Silva is an expert on refugees and children and issues of international affairs, especially as they relate to political violence and human rights. PL.
Good morning, everybody. I'll be talking today about the cultivation of hatred, which is something that we need to be cognizant of. And I begin by quoting the leading French Enlightenment philosopher, Voltaire, who was renowned for his criticisms of Christianity, particularly with regard to the dogmas of the traditional Catholic Church in the 18th century, and his staunch advocacy of the freedom of religion, freedom of opinion and expression, and the separation of church and state. Voltaire said quite astutely, it's one of my favorite quotes, "If we believe in absurdities, we shall commit atrocities." And this statement holds true even in the 21st century. There are so many well-documented examples of thousands upon thousands of atrocity crimes and terrorism. Islamic State and Al-Qaeda in its various formats that includes the 9/11 suicide terrorist attack on the Twin Towers in New York, the Bosnian genocide in Srebrenica and Jepa in '95, and the wider ethnic cleansing of the Bosnian War, the Rwandan genocide, the Khmer Rouge genocide in Cambodia, the Nazi Holocaust, the Ukrainian genocide under Stalin. The list is seemingly endless and an indictment of our human story. Ethnic cleansings, suicide bombings, and forced migrations are a constant reminder of the absurdity of war and political violence, including the civil war in my native country, Sri Lanka. The ongoing exodus out of Africa and the Middle East since the 2011 Arab Spring is another symptom where men, women, and children have become commodities as slaves, sex workers, and even victims of organ harvesting. Loosely knit criminal human trafficking gangs in sub-Saharan Africa and the Sicilian mafia, who are connected via the central Mediterranean routes human trafficking hub in Libya, earned between 5 to 6 billion euros in 2015, according to Interpol and Europol. So, how do we arrive at these blood-soaked situations where terror, fear, death, dismemberment, and disappearance are common calling cards of the perpetrators? If those of us who are gathered here today truly want to counter war, hatred, and violence, we must address the insidious cultivation of hatred that goes on every day in all parts of the world, including in Western democracies in North America and Europe. On Tuesday, October 23rd, 2018, Pope Francis told an audience of young people at a book launch at the Vatican that populism starts by sowing hate. His Holiness Pope Francis noted that Hitler and Nazi Germany rose to power through the use of populism and appealed for more tolerance and decried the rise of populism during his speech. Pope Francis said there should be more efforts to teach young people about the history of World War I and World War II so that they do not fall into the same mistake and know how populism spreads. Pope Francis warned, it is important that young people should know how populism is born. I think of Hitler last century, who had promised the development of Germany, that we know how populism starts by sowing hate. You can't live sowing hate, it was reported in the Italian news. Pope Francis also called for the protection of refugees and irregular migrants in Italy and Europe from populist excesses. On another continent in Australia, Populist anti-immigrant sentiments and draconian policies have led to the curtailing of civil liberties of asylum seekers and contributed to mental illness among children and adults detained offshore on Manus Island in Papua New Guinea. Under intense pressure, the government of Australia decided on Thursday, November 1st, 2018, that traumatized children languishing in Australian-run offshore migrant detention centers will be removed by the end of the year. In the United States, only 4 days after Pope Francis's warning on Saturday, October 27th, during the Shabbat service, a heinous gun attack by American far-right terrorist Robert Bowers killed 11 worshippers at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Squirrel Hill, Pittsburgh, who said he wanted to kill Jewish people. The now standard postscript, according to law enforcement, was that it was a hate crime by a lone wolf gunman, which is the big lie. Aren't those who cultivate hatred culpable? The synagogue attack followed a wave around 15 package bombs that were mailed to leading figures and a media institution critical of President Donald Trump, and was widely seen as demonstrating a rising level of hatred and violence in the United States. A steady stream of hatred and fake news is spewed out on a daily basis from a variety of sources and has contributed to this rise in hate crimes, including hate speech and violence against minority groups in the United States. It is like Dr. Goebbels on steroids. The cultivation of hatred in the United States, a champion of democracy, is very worrying, and this is why I'm focusing on this. And examples include inflammatory tweets and public statements by the 45th President of the United States, the far-right Gab social media network, which is reported to be the largest hate site on the web, and used 2 hours prior to his attack on the Pittsburgh synagogue by the American far-right terrorist Robert Bowers to announce that he was going in. The American neo-Nazi, white supremacist, Holocaust-denying commentary and message board website, The Daily Stormer, which advocates genocide for the Jews and considered itself a part of the alt-right, which should be called neo-fascists, founded on July 4, 2013 by its editor, Andrew Anglin, who also uses the Gab social media platform. The Breitbart News Network, which is a far-right syndicated American news, opinion, and commentary website, and the populist American cable and satellite television Fox News Channel and its reporting, which contains conservative editorializing, bias, and even misinformation. So, the hate mongers sanctimoniously pretend they do not have a hand in hate crimes, right-wing neo-fascist terrorism, racist murders, and related atrocities. And at the same time, they tolerate neo-fascists and white supremacists marching in the streets of the United States and the right to bear arms. 3 weeks prior to Pope Francis's condemnation of the sowing of hatred, on Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018, Saudi national and Washington Post correspondent Jamal Khashoggi was brutally murdered inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, admittedly by a 15-member assassination squad dispatched from Riyadh that was armed with, among other things, a bone saw to ostensibly dismember body parts. The reaction from Arab leaders has been a shameful and pitiful display of sycophancy. It is similar to the general silence by global leaders and the lack of serious condemnation of the Saudi-led war in Yemen and the war looking on to the thousands, and the world looking on to the thousands of civilian casualties, with 50% of Yemenis on the verge of mass starvation that could become the worst famine in the last 100 years. Leading armaments-producing countries such as the United States, Russia, France, Britain, Germany, China, and even Spain have continued to sell weapons to the Saudi-led coalition without a care about the humanitarian dimension, and should be roundly condemned as war profiteers. How is it that such atrocities, from single events such as the Jamal Khashoggi murder to war crimes in Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Israel, Palestine, and other conflict-affected societies are tolerated? Have we all become so atomized and brutalized that we are numb, paralyzed, unable to mobilize and engage in nonviolent direct action to bring about justice, the rule of law, and strict adherence to the Geneva Conventions and the laws of war, and the promotion of democratic values, norms, and civil and human rights? What kind of legacy are we bequeathing to the next generations of humanity? At the heart of the solution to countering war, hatred, and violence, as Pope Francis has so correctly pointed out, is stopping the cultivation of hatred and populism, promoting greater tolerance of others, and educating the youth with regard to democratic values, norms, freedom of opinion and expression, and civil and human rights, given that they will inherit the custodianship of planet Earth and its peoples. We must strive to be inclusive and celebrate difference as opposed to succumbing to the fear of others. Vive la différence! To be able to bequeath a legacy worthy of our generation, we must strive hard daily with non-stop vigilance to protect and preserve the legacies of our forebears, such as Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, and Mahatma Gandhi, in order to bring about peace and stability in deeply divided societies where reconciliation, faith, and ethical leadership is what is most urgently needed. Thank you.